I'm Ashton Addison from EventChain for Investment Pitch Media and FinTech News Network. And today on Blockchain Interviews, we have Gunnar Jaerv, the COO of First Digital Trust. Gunnar, welcome to the show, and thanks for being here today.
Thanks for having me. Very nice to be here.
You're very welcome. I'd love to start off with a bit of your background in finance and digital assets, and then we'll jump into your work at First Digital Trust.
Mhm. I've been with First Digital Trust for more than a year. Before that, I was working 7+ years with a company called Legacy Trust, which is actually the origin story of First Digital Trust. So First Digital Trust is a spin-off company from Legacy Trust. Previously, my background, I was focusing on what we called private label and special purpose trusts, which were basically all non-standard trust arrangements. And that's how we really got into digital asset space when we had a lot of clients coming to us and asking for these sort of new kinds of arrangements involving digital assets, cryptocurrencies, and all of that. So that's pretty much how I got into it.
Very cool. And I know that First Digital Trust actually provides a wide variety of services in digital assets, but can you start with explaining what is the main focus right now with the trust, and where are you growing the most?
So we're sort of trying to bridge the gap between the traditional and the sort of the digital world. There's a lot of crypto custodians and digital asset custodians out there. First Digital Trust is definitely the only multi-asset custodian in Asia, which means we can hold traditional assets, your investment types, like stocks, bonds. We hold fiat, and we also hold cryptocurrencies, digital assets. And our main focus is really on bridging and blending those two sides together.
Mm-hmm. That's great that you're able to have both of those. And I know that your team has also implemented an instant settlement network for institutional investors to trade digital assets throughout Asia. Mm-hmm. How big of a step was this for the industry? And are you seeing a lot of institutional interest throughout Asia right now?
Well, yeah, we already work with numerous providers in the digital asset space, like OTC desks and exchanges. And the issue we really had in Asia was that we are sort of operating in the industry that's borderless. But in Asia, it's very fragmented in terms of countries. Since we can hold all kinds of different assets, we can take clients from all of these different jurisdictions. It was a huge step in a way that it allows these companies and institutions from different countries to settle assets and their investments instantaneously within a single platform without having to wait T+1, T+2. And this is very different from, let's say, from US, where you have some of the equivalent sort of systems provided by the local banks, where you're operating in the same jurisdiction. Mm-hmm. So I would say it's quite interesting. It brought in some interesting benefits for a lot of industry players. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That's great. And I read that BnkToTheFuture, which is one of the largest online investment communities, they've invested in most of the unicorns in the space. They have moved all of their clients' assets from the traditional banking infrastructure over to First Digital Trust. So I think that's a huge move. So congratulations on that. Can you elaborate on the differences that makes for a large investment platform and how they benefit from moving over to First Digital Trust?
So I think the benefit and the sort of the match there is more of a philosophical match. So if you know the story of BnkToTheFuture, and if you read the book, and if you know their sort of long story back 10 years, there's a very sort of strong belief that today's fractional reserve banking is inherently dangerous and that there are risks associated with that. Mm-hmm. And I think they were very sort of attracted to the idea of using a trust, because trusts work very differently. In any kind of a fiduciary arrangement, we don't lend out client money, we don't pledge it, we don't, if you put money in a bank, $100 into the bank will lend out $90, and they have to hold the reserves. But trusts work very differently. So I think on their part there was a philosophical match, and also we are sort of strong believers in that, and for the end users or end clients, it eventually makes it more safer, because they can know that it's a proper trust or fiduciary arrangement that's in place, instead of funds just sitting somewhere in a bank where those could be lent out.
Definitely. And now in the States, it's not even $90. Now it's all $100 they can just lend out, and there's not even any money there at all.
Exactly.
So
Yeah.
I could see why the benefits of why that would be a benefit. And to touch on security a little bit further, I know that First Digital Trust is also working with Ledger, which is one of the most popular hardware wallets. And I'm curious on how exactly you guys are working with Ledger. It seems like it's already one of the most secure wallets, but is there a security, discussion that you're having with them moving forward as well?
So I think, well, it's worth mentioning how and when it got started. So it was about 3 years ago, and Ledger was building, back then they were building a product called Ledger Vault, which is the institutional equivalent of their sort of Ledger Nano, which is a retail device where everybody can hold their assets. But back then there was no proper solution for institutions, and we were one of the first ones to partner up with Ledger and roll it out in Asia. And the main sort of rationale for us was, we were really faced with a question because we were already operating in the space. We were, using proprietary technology, all that. So the main question was, are we going to build our own, like technology, all of that, or are we going to, build or buy essentially? And we really liked what Ledger was doing. They had a really good reputation. That back then they had 200 plus people working. They have their own supply chains. They manufacture their own devices in France. So that was very appealing to us. And yeah, we decided to partner up with that. Their security and their reputation I think is, probably the best out there. So we have really benefited from that. Where our focus right now is not so much on the security. We believe the security issue has been largely solved if the technology is used correctly. Where we're trying to improve now is internal controls and operational controls. And it's also a good match because Ledger is focusing on that. And they, on the Ledger Vault platform, they have different ways of creating different operational rules. And it allows us to bring in the traditional sort of banking or financial level internal controls into this industry. So I think that's where really the security aspect and the focus is right now.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I'm curious if your team is also doing anything similar with exchanges as well, because there have been a lot of hacks. Even recently, there's still hacks with exchanges, and although some of the funds seem to be stored away safely, the hot wallets are being hacked, and even the cold wallets seem to be vulnerable at times. Is First Digital Trust trying to work with security of exchanges moving forward?
So where we're really pushing is, again, we're pushing on the internal controls, because any kind of cold wallet or hot wallet, the weakest point is always the human link and procedures and policies. So you can have the most secure, vault under a mountain in Switzerland, but if you don't have proper security and if there's a vulnerability in terms of human error there, then it's still vulnerable. Exchanges, I think they're not at that level yet, where they're really actively thinking about these things. It really comes more from the traditional side, but we're very happy to sort of lend our knowledge and help anybody that's sort of interested in improving their security. There's ways to have multiple controls where our client could, let's say, could initiate transactions. We could be the additional approvers. There's so many ways it could be configured. But the main thing is it really revolves around internal controls and policies and procedures. I think these days that's what exchanges, OTC desks need to focus on to improve their security.
Well said. And you mentioned traditional banks and the traditional banking infrastructure. The Asian banking infrastructure seems like it's doing fairly well, at least compared to the American infrastructure. But the American banks did just say that they're now allowing to have custody of users' cryptocurrency and digital assets. So I'm guessing that they're going to need more compliance and more knowledge to understand the security and protocols needed to safely store these assets. Are you working with any of those partners to get them up to speed?
So I think this topic, there could be a whole another interview about this, because there's so many moving pieces there. I think the announcement itself was very great news. It sort of made this, I would say, let's say, new asset class or digital assets more acceptable to the banks. I think banks will be less afraid to deal with companies that deal with digital assets. But if you ask me whether the banks are going to be holding digital assets, I just really quickly want to jump back to that reserve question. And I've asked this, some of my friends in the banking industry, and some of the companies that we work with, and nobody really has been able to explain it to me. So imagine if you're a bank and you hold Bitcoin or you hold Ethereum, and if you take in the volatility of the cryptocurrency market, and if your central government has put in, or central bank has put in a 10% reserve requirement, how do you manage your reserves if you have an asset that goes up or down 25, 30% could go up or down in a day? So it's very difficult for them to manage those reserves. And I think security, of course, safekeeping assets is one part. I believe there's technology for that. But I think the bigger question is, how do they manage the reserves? And that's a big open question. So I don't think we will see, like, you won't be able to walk into a major bank in New York or somewhere and make a Bitcoin deposit or borrow Ethereum or something like that. That's way in the future. And I think specialized companies like lenders and different platforms like trading platforms will still dominate this space. And in the future, maybe the banks, the better route would be maybe to sort of acquire some of those companies and then bring it into the traditional system.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I could see how the banks would want people to store their digital assets with them so that they could leverage those to make more money, because they are looking for new revenue models all the time. So that would make sense. And as banks continue to get more involved, there's also the security risks. And overall, I know that First Digital Trust is, you've been working with a Microsoft-backed partner Onfido to help with fraud. Can you talk about your relationship there, and how does that help overall all of your customers and clients?
So our relationship with Onfido actually goes years back as well. We started using them way back for identity verification. And back then they were just a startup. Obviously, they've grown tremendously. They've, just this year they've won so many awards in Europe. And the reason why we really liked working with them is, even way back then, they were focusing on building the technology and they were heavily investing in AI. So for us, when we're dealing with clients around the world, it's quite important that we know who our clients are. And that doesn't mean that, okay, we know where you work, what's your name and what's your passport number. But we also need to know that, that they're a real person, that we have a, high degree of assurance that we know who we're dealing with. This goes back to KYC and AML rules and all of that. And they were sort of innovating back then in that space. They were doing the selfie and passport photo system that, we could integrate into our systems. And most recently, they have been working on AI technology. And this is like super interesting again, like could be another whole topic. But there is actually been studies where they've proven that AI is actually better at recognizing people's faces now, in the border checkpoints, than people. So they've done a study and the computers are better at recognizing it. So we're very bullish on this. And it helps us to generate this sort of provides us additional confidence and generate this sort of assured identity concept, even if we're not meeting people face to face, or they're not coming into our office. And in today's world where we have travel restrictions, lockdowns, all of that, how do you deal with your global client base? I think this is the stuff for the future, and they're working on very interesting stuff.
Yeah, that's super interesting, and that AI note, that's really cool. And it seems that's the trend across multiple industries. It's the human error that is usually where there's the flaws, and once you introduce AI, then that's taken away. So we're running out of time, Gunnar. But my last question is, how is First Digital Trust continuing to grow? Are you also looking for other partnerships or just more clients as you grow?
So our focus right now is building products and sort of pushing the industry forward. We were very much focused on custody before, but now we see custody as an infrastructure piece. The same thing for like settlement. We were trying to solve some of these bigger problems. Our focus really is going to be on specific products. We're very bullish about tokenization. There's been positive regulatory news from Hong Kong from US, different jurisdictions. I think sort of in private equity, private placement space, this is gaining speed right now. It's not there yet in a big sense, but when it comes to tokenization, again, it's something where because whenever you have traditional assets, you need, let's say, traditional custodians, traditional trustees to hold that, to provide that independent assurance. So that's pretty much where our focus is, and we're very keen to work with different companies that are active in that space. I think that's our main focus.
Great. And if the viewers are looking to learn more on First Digital Trust, what's the best way to learn more?
You can always check out our website. You can Google us. We're mostly online. We do a lot of conferences. Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you so much for your time, Gunnar. It's been a pleasure speaking with you. All the best with First Digital Trust, and let's follow up in the near future.
Thank you very much.